Welcome. My name is Jim Tam, and for almost 25 years I was a judge in California dealing with conflict in the workplace. I'm sorry I'm only with you here by video today, but hopefully we can meet in person at next year's conference. Today I want to talk with you about collaboration in the workplace. When I was a judge dealing with workplace disputes, we noticed a pattern of seeing the same people end up in litigation over and over and over again. And we also noticed that there were other employers and unions that we almost never saw. There were organizations that were doing the same line of work, that were hiring employees from the same labor pool. They were operating under the same laws. And some of them couldn't solve a problem if their life depended upon it or their business depended upon it. And others were highly skilled at collaboration, and they almost never ended up in front of a judge. These collaborative organizations had learned how to resolve their differences in a way that supported key relationships within their organizations. The organizations that were not effective at collaboration were costing the state of California a huge amount of money, not just for judges' salaries like mine or courtrooms, but mostly due to lost productivity. Teams or entire organizations that are not skilled at collaboration spend more time, energy, and resources on self-preservation and self-protection than they do on problem solving. They're not as creative, not as productive, and more importantly, they're not as profitable as those that are skillful at collaboration. So seeing that we had a big problem with hostile, conflicted workplaces in California, a small group of us got together and we set out to see what we could do about that. We got a big research grant from the Hewlett Foundation, did a massive amount of research. We were trying to understand what's the difference between these highly conflicted workplaces and those that were much more collaborative. Based on that research then, we put together a program to try to teach these uncollaborative workforces how to be much more effective. Then we went out looking for the most screwed up, hostile, conflicted workplaces that we could find. And that proved to be the easiest thing that we could do because they're all over the place. But we wanted to test our theories on workplaces that were not easy. The training was initially sponsored by the state of California and a couple of foundations, the Hewlett Foundation and the Stewart Foundation. And it turned out that we were wildly successful, beyond our dreams successful. We reduced the amount of measurable conflict, things like unfair labor practice charges filed with the state of California, or requests for mediators, things where the state had kept very accurate records for almost 20 years before we started this project, so we could accurately compare both before and after in the same periods of time. We produced a 67% reduction in that measurable conflict in almost 100 organizations over a 3.5-year period. In one study, 70% of the employees said their work relationships were highly conflicted and hostile before the training. Now, that's an outrageously high number, but remember, we set out looking for the most screwed up, hostile, conflicted workplaces we could find. So that high number didn't surprise us. What shocked us, however, was that after the training, that number was reduced to a little bit less than 1%. Now that is a startling and amazing difference to come from 70% down to less than 1%. The number of people who said they had high trust in their working relationships increased by 50%. Before the training, 57% said their working relationships were unproductive. After the training, 87% reported their working relationships were productive. Almost all participants reported that they were able to come up with better, more creative solutions to the problems that they had to deal with on a daily basis. See, they weren't just nicer to each other and more creative, they were also more productive. This saved the state of California so much money that the state legislature created a nonprofit foundation to continue offering this program to public sector organizations in California. So what did we learn from all this? Well, for one thing, We now know that it's possible to transform hostile, highly conflicted, adversarial environments to more supportive and highly collaborative workplaces in a reasonably short period of time. More importantly, we learned that there are 5 key skills that are absolutely essential to creating a collaborative workplace. These 5 skills are both a mindset and a skill set. They're a set of attitudes and a set of competencies that you can learn in a reasonably short period of time and apply immediately, making a big difference to any organization or team or relationship. The first skill we call collaborative intention, which means having a personal commitment to mutual success in your working relationships, and particularly having the ability to stay focused on those mutual gains when you hit one of those speed bumps in the road, like someone making a mistake or doing something that you don't understand. When that happens, can you get curious about what happened and why? Or do you almost automatically become furious that it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to? The second skill we call openness, which is the ability to create an environment where people feel safe enough to raise difficult issues and tell their truth about what's going on from their point of view. This was the main finding of a very intensive and extensive research study lasting several years by Google. It was called Project Aristotle. Google's one of the most data-driven companies in the world, and they wanted to find out how to produce high-performing teams. So they studied 180 of their own teams, both high-performing and low-performing teams. They looked at experience levels, length of service, age, gender, racial balances, how much time the team members interacted socially outside of work. In other words, did they go to lunch together or have dinner together or on vacation, their education levels, etc., etc. If they could think of a potential factor and they could measure it, they measured it. And for most of the things that they measured, they concluded that they could do just as good a job selecting teams by throwing a dart at some random list of names. But there was one factor that stood out far and above everything else they studied. They discovered that a high level of something called psychological safety was absolutely critical to being a high-performing team. That term comes from research done by Harvard professor Amy Edmondson, who describes it as a shared belief held by members of the team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking, and a shared sense of confidence that the team will not embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up. That's what creates the level of openness that we want for effective collaboration. The third skill we call self-accountability. It's where individuals take responsibility for the circumstances of their lives, for the choices that they make, either through action or non-action, and for both the intended and the unintended consequences of those actions. They would rather find a solution than find someone to blame. The fourth skill we call self-awareness and awareness of others. It's where people commit to knowing themselves deeply and are willing to explore difficult interpersonal issues. They seek to understand the concerns, the intentions, the motivations of others, as well as the context and the culture of their circumstances. The fifth skill is negotiating and problem solving. That's where individuals can negotiate their way through the conflict that is inevitable in any long-term relationship, especially work relationships. And they do it in a way that supports the strong relationships rather than undermining them. They use problem-solving methods that promote a cooperative atmosphere and avoid fostering subtle or unconscious competition. Now, these skills I'm telling you about are not brain surgery or rocket science, although we have taught them to employees at NASA, including astronauts. But most of these skills are very practical skills that can be learned in a very few days. They make immediate positive difference on any team. Now I want to end by giving you a little sneak preview of a research study conducted by Roy Morales from the Tec de Monterrey in Cuernavaca. My expectation is that this will be released within the next couple of months. Roy did a follow-up study of participants from 14 radical collaboration workshops teaching these 5 skills, conducted between August 2017 and March 2020. All were done in Mexico. Roy documented a 40% improvement in the ability of participants to resolve conflicts and almost a 50% improvement in the ability of participants to handle differences between themselves and others. Now that didn't shock me because that's pretty consistent, even though those are great numbers. It's pretty consistent with previous research that I've seen about these 5 skills. However, what did surprise me was the number of people who identified their work environment as a source of stress, causing anxiety, illnesses, and sleeping problems. And the participants reported that those 5 skills helped them deal with that stress. On a 5-point scale where 1 meant that the skills didn't help at all and 5 meant that the skills helped a lot, the average score of all the participants was just about 4. So we're seeing that these same 5 skills can also be a significant help in relieving stress and burnout in the workplace. Well, I hope this has been an interesting and helpful for you to hear about these skills. I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you for listening.